Hello, my name is Abby and I am the Talking Book Librarian. Thank you for joining us for our book talk series. These videos will be recorded and put out on the Indiana State Library's YouTube channel, as well as the Talking Book Facebook page. The purpose of these book talks is to provide book ideas for book clubs and to include questions for you to answer for yourself or in a book club setting. These videos will remain online forever, so you can decide to read these books whenever you'd like. If you are interested in this book or any of the others, please give the Talking Book employees a call at 800-622-4970. Please feel free to pause the video at any time to answer any of the questions. The book we will be discussing today is The Wager by David Grann. We'll get to the slides. Maybe. There we go. So that is a picture of the front of the book. It looks like it is a old galleon ship on some waves, and underneath it says The Wager, a tale of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder. So on January 28, 1742, a ramshackle vessel of patched together wood and cloth washed up on the coast of Brazil. Inside were 30 emaciated men, barely alive, and they had an extraordinary tale to tell. They were survivors of His Majesty's ship, The Wager, a British vessel that had left England in 1740 on a secret mission during an imperial war with Spain. While The Wager had been chasing a Spanish treasure-filled galleon known as the Prize of All the Oceans, it had wrecked on a desolate island off the coast of Patagonia. The men, after being marooned for months and facing starvation, built the flimsy craft and sailed for more than 100 days, traversing nearly 3,000 miles of storm-wracked seas. They were greeted as heroes, but then, 6 months later, another, even more decrepit craft landed on the coast of Chile. This boat contained just 3 castaways, and they told a very different story. The 30 sailors who landed in Brazil were not heroes. They were mutineers. The first group responded with countercharges of their own, of a tyrannical and murderous senior officer and his henchmen. It became clear that while stranded on the island, the crew had fallen into anarchy, with warring factions fighting for dominion over the barren wilderness. As accusations of treachery and murder flew, the Admiralty convened a court-martial to determine who was telling the truth. The stakes were life and death. For whomever the court found guilty would hang. The Wager is a grand tale of human behavior at the extremes told by one of our greatest nonfiction writers. Grann's recreation of the hidden world on a British warship rivals the work of Patrick O'Brian. His portrayal of the castaways' desperate straits stands up to the classics of survival writing, such as The Endurance. And his account of the court-martial has the savvy of a Scott Turow thriller. As always with Grann's work, the incredible twists of the narrative hold the reader spellbound. And this is about the author. David Grann is a #1 New York Times bestselling author and an award-winning staff writer at the New Yorker magazine. His most recent book is The Wager. It was published in April 2023. And of course, it tells the story of the human condition and all of the other stuff that I just talked about. He is also the author of Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders and Birth of the FBI, which is also became a movie that has Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and that was just a couple of years ago. And of course, this was selected by Amazon as the single best book of the year when it came out in, I believe, 2021. Grann holds a master's degree in international relations from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and creative writing from Boston University. Got to click a button. After graduating from Connecticut College in 1989, he received a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship and did research in Mexico, where he began his career in journalism. He currently lives in New York with his wife and 2 children. And now we'll get into a few of the discussion questions. The first question is, discuss your understanding of the reasons for the Wager's expedition. How is it that the War of Jenkins' Ear, defended and undermined as a motive in the years that follow the shipwreck, as different accounts of the mutiny are brought to light? Compared to today's technology, the resources available to the crew of the Wager and other similar vessels could be considered primitive. How were they able to achieve such feats of exploration, travel, and military victory? Discuss the strengths and weaknesses of this particular ship and maritime technology in general, such as poor sanitation, nutrition, medical care, leadership, etc. Discuss the quality of life among the sailors and officers while at sea, including the reflection that, quote, death is at all times solemn, but never so much so as at sea. The man is near you, at your side. You hear his voice, and in an instant he is gone, end quote, on page 64. What other losses are heightened at sea? Which members of the crew stood out to you as unsung heroes of the journey? Who surprised you in their assertiveness or cowardice once they arrived on the island? How might the men have fared if they had respected their relationship with the Kawascar? What belief systems and limitations of their physical and mental state contributed to their abuse of this potentially limited life-saving connection? Grann calls in various now named and documented trauma-induced conditions the effects of starvation indicated by the Minnesota starvation experiment, refeeding syndrome seen in concentration camp survivors during World War II, and describing the extreme behavior of the men moored on the island. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a situation where your survival was on the line? How did you react? Even if it was on a smaller scale, could you relate to any of the accounts of the men's desperation? One of the more extreme acts of survival the men enacted is cannibalism, eating the remains of deceased crew members and contemplating the killing of one for food. Have you heard of other instances of humans being forced to eat other humans for survival? What would you do if you were in that situation? How does Bulkley set himself up to become the leader of the mutinous crew? Do you think there would have been a shift in power even if Cheap hadn't shot Cousins? Why was Byron so compelled to remain loyal to Cheap? Discuss the pull of naval law versus personal beliefs on the men's sense of morality and righteousness, based on what we can glean from their records. As Grann interprets for Byron, quote, to play a role in totally deserting his commander, no matter how flawed and tyrannical he was, threatened the romantic image of himself that he clung to, despite the horrors of the voyage, end quote. If you were among the survivors of the shipwreck, which side would you have supported? Defending Cheap or mutiny? Why? Did you agree with the scale of the accusations set against both sides of the Wager's survivors? Where did the law seem rightfully upheld, and where could there have been more leeway? Discuss how you've seen similarly blurry interpretations of the law, martial or otherwise. If your lifetime, I don't think I understand that question, but discuss how you've seen similarly blurred laws before. And, why do you think that was done that way? Were you surprised by the outcome of the trial after Cheap et al. Returned to London? What does this suggest about the British Empire's priorities at the time? And what other crimes might have been exonerated for convenience's sake? Consider these interpretations from a historian quoted in the book, which is, quote, a mutiny is like a horrible, malignant disease, and the chances that the patient will die an agonizing death are so great that the subject cannot even be mentioned aloud, end quote. And Grann's Analysis. Quote, a mutiny, especially in times of war, can be so threatening to the established order that it is not even officially recognized as one. End quote. Discuss the various accounts of the Wager's experience as written by Bulkley and others, along with narratives like Reverend Walters of the Centurion and the non-existent narrative of Black Seaman John Duck. What do the subjectivities and manipulations behind these accounts suggest about the nature of history? What stories do you know of the past, global, national, familial, that have multiple or competing versions? Besides its content, Bulkley's published account of the events on the island stood out for its crisp and plain maritime style, reflective of its author's social position and his personality. Do you think his confidence in not altering his voice influenced the reader's trust in his evidence, including the government officials? Compare this to some of the reflections that we hear from Byron in the book, a noted romantic and a mere boy when he first set out to sea. In the book's epilogue, we learn that Captain Anson is chiefly remembered by history as the father of the British Navy. What other figures do you know from history who have made legitimate contributions to society worthy of celebration, alongside darker and more malicious behaviors? Who decides which facets of heroes or which facets of villains are remembered? What does Bulkley's fate in America suggest about his character? Do you think he would have ventured to the colonies if he hadn't led the mutiny? Are you aware of other forgotten narratives from history that are now being exhumed and for which restitution is being demanded? How do they compare to the circumstances of this mutiny? Many different groups of people experienced enslavement during this time period for economic and political reasons. How did this history expand your understanding of the scope of slavery during the colonial era? Quote, empires preserve their power with stories that they tell, but just as critical are the stories that they don't. The dark silences they impose, the pages they tear out, end quote, writes Grann. Do you suspect that there are holes even in this historical account based on what the empire silenced at the time? The documentation of the Wager's trials is admittedly incomplete and full of contradictions. How do you imagine the author of this book going about sorting the truth of what happened? Have you ever tried to piece together a narrative from fragments of memory or from documents? And then those questions came from Penguin Random House. Penguin Random House did do the first publication, I believe, of The Wager, and they included some discussion questions along with the publishing. So that's where I got those from. And now I would like to provide just a few of my own thoughts on the book. I enjoyed the book. I first read David Grann when I read The Killers of the Flower Moon. And then, of course, I watched the movie because it was just as entertaining. And then I had this on my to-be read list and just decided why not make it a book talk instead. So that way I forced myself to read it. I'm not a big nonfiction reader typically, so it was nice to be able to pick it up and kind of get out of my comfort zone. I enjoy historical nonfiction. I especially haven't really read a lot about shipwrecks and mutinies and all of that stuff. So that was a new and exciting thing to read about for me. I learned a lot of stuff about how important it is, history be told from the people experiencing it, how Britain kind of squashed it down and said, oh, it's fine. This didn't actually really happen because it didn't look good on their part if they had people mutinying and eating each other, basically. So it was an interesting read. I had a good time. It was longer than I expected it to be, but I really enjoyed that he did go into like the depositions and the going into the courts, which I think helped give it a more round picture. So I do definitely recommend if you like swashbuckling books. This very much kind of feels like a pirate high seas book, which is really what it was. So I recommend picking it up and also picking up any of other David Grann's books because they're also very, very good. It is March 17th. So I will see everybody back in May for our next book talk. See you guys later.